In this video, we're going to take a look at the Eldritch Knight. It is the third fighter class specialization, as you can see here in the bottom of the list, that comes with the player's handbook, and is a little bit different than the other two class specializations that we've looked at so far for the fighter. What makes the Eldritch Knight class specialization different is the ability to cast spells, and you can make use of those spells while in combat and alongside a melee attack in some cases. Whereas the champion and the battle master, they were primarily enhancing weaponry that they already had and made use of, or abilities that they added additional capabilities to those. Spellcasting gives you a whole new paradigm when it comes to actively contributing to a particular combat encounter, or even something outside of a combat encounter. As an Eldritch Knight, you do get the ability to cast cantrips, and anything from level 1 through to level 4 spells. And I believe they are arcane spells. They are not clerical type of spells or druidic spells. Cantrips, in case you didn't know, are spells that a character can cast repeatedly, in a sense, as in they don't utilize a spell slot, which means that they don't necessarily expire each time you cast them. So, for example, you could cast Firebolt, and then cast Firebolt again in your next turn, and then cast Firebolt again in your next turn. And that spell isn't going to expire if that's one of the cantrips that you decided to take. And that's what makes Eldritch Knights very versatile when it comes to what kind of encounters they can deal with. So let's begin the process of leveling up the Eldritch Knight. So once again, you want to take your fighter class and drag it and drop it over top of the fighter 2 level specification that we have here. If you're unsure how to get to your character sheet, or the class sheet rather, you literally can click on this magnifying glass here on your main character sheet. Click on this little icon that I have here, and in those of you who are using the default themes, it will be the dragon head icon. And click that, and it will open up this particular window. And just before I continue, I'm actually going to give this particular character a name and a portrait. And why did you do that? There we go. Okay. Not a temporary name anyway. This is a human. There we go. Just so that I can save this. And unfortunately, when you import a character, no matter whether they have a portrait saved or not, in some cases the portrait doesn't always import. Now it's a cleric. Champion I've already used. Unfortunately, you can't search through this particular thing. So for now, I'm going to apply that portrait, and I'm also going to apply a token. Let's see, is there anything in this one? We'll use this one, just for now. May find something later. Again, this is in case I temporarily bring back these two characters, and this one will be just to keep with the standard that we've been using so far. Although, my OCD, there. All right. So, level 3, all I have to do is left click on the eye icon, or dragon icon in those using the default screen, and drop it on top of the fighter 2. And you'll see here that we have our martial archetype pop up. And I want to select Eldritch Knight this time. And then I'm going to have to start looking into what this means to be an Eldritch Knight. And the reason for that is that I do get spells, which means I now have to go through and look at what spells I have. At the same time, I need to know how many I can actually take. And with cantrips, you can learn 2 cantrips of your choice from a wizard spell list, and you can learn an additional cantrip of your choice at 10th level. So when we hit 10th level, we'll have to remember to make sure to choose another cantrip, which means we start off with 2. Now, a lot of cases, I have seen Firebolt and Mage Hand taken. I've seen Mending taken in some cases. Ray of Frost. So it really comes down to what you as a player are comfortable with figuring that you're going to make use of. So I'm going to take Firebolt and Mage Hand, just for kicks. And I've opened up these two spell cantrips, rather, and they have not automatically been applied to my character, even though I have a spell tab that's here. You'll see that it's empty. There's no spells in it because I haven't chosen any yet. You'll also see that I have 2 spell slots. And this is where the spell slot capability comes into play when dealing with magic casting for an Eldritch Knight. The system should, for the most part, automatically figure out how many spell slots you have, and that is dictated by the spellcasting table that should be here. So at 3rd level, you have 2 known cantrips and 3 known spells, meaning that you have the ability to know 3 spells, not cast 3 spells, whereas this tells you you have the ability to cast 2 spells. Okay? And as you go up through the ranks, you'll see that you'll get additional spell slots up to the maximum of level 4 when you hit level 20. Okay. So to add these 2 cantrips to my action tab, all I do is grab the eye icon and drop it into place. And you'll see it will create a cantrips category for spells. And I do the same thing with Firebolt, and it will drop it into place. Now, in the case of Mage Hand, it has no real effect. That's a spell that you can make use of to do various things, such as open doors from a distance, open chests, or other objects from a distance. In case there are traps on that particular object, you could do so from out of the range of that particular object. You could use it as a prank. For example, you could poke somebody in the butt or on the back or somewheres. You can slap someone on the back of the head as a distraction, things like that. So there's a whole slew of uses for it, but it doesn't require any preparation or anything like that because it is a cantrip. And that's one thing that cantrips allow you to do. You could literally cast this over and over and over again outside of a combat encounter, and you could literally cast it every single turn within a combat encounter if you chose to. I don't know why you would, but whatever. Firebolt is the same way. Because it is a cantrip, you don't have to study it or prepare it in order to be able to cast it. But it does have an attack capability as well as a damage component. So when you actually make use of it, so if I go to combat, when you make use of it, you would make an attack roll like this, and I just clicked on that once. Nice, I rolled a 20. Yay. And you'll see that it rolled 2d10. Because I rolled a critical hit, it automatically doubled the damage. Die rolls, I should say, not doubled the damage. It doubled the die. And you can see that I did 14 points of damage. In addition to the cantrips, we also get to pick 3 spells. So I'm going to go back up and open up the spell slot here. Now, I can only learn 1st level spells. I don't have the ability to understand 2nd, 3rd, or 4th level spells at this point. So out of this particular list here, I can only choose 3 1st level spells. So let's see. What am I going to do? And I'm just going to close these so that they're out of the way because they're already on the action page. Identify is always useful. Magic Missile, many of you might recognize that. And it's not really an area of effect capability, whereas this has the potential to be. Okay, so that's what I'm going to choose for this. All right, so once again, I'm literally just going to select Burning Hands. While holding down the left mouse button after clicking on it on the eye, I'm just going to drop it into place. And you'll see now that I have a level 1 spell slot, or spell known. And I'm just going to drag and drop the other 2 into place. As a spellcaster, you now have the ability to prepare a spell. So in this case, what that means is that when you select and activate that pip, you're telling the dungeon master that those are the 3 spells you have taken the time to prepare during your morning ablutions, whatever you do, when after you wake up after a long rest, things like that. So you want to make sure that they are actually ticked to show that they are prepared. And the reason for that is because when you actually get to the point of executing combat, once you run out of spell slots, you lose the ability to cast first level spells. But at the same time, it tells the DM, those are the ones you've prepared. You can't cast anything out of that particular scope. So, for example, once you get down to here, you'll see that we can learn an additional spell. But there might still be a limitation as to how many spells you can actually prepare. Okay, so let's confirm that just 1 second. I'm just going to pause the video for that. Interestingly enough, the Eldritch Knight doesn't seem to require that. It looks like you are restricted to the tabular values here, as opposed to gaining a bonus because of your intelligence or anything. So I've just read this a couple of times just to make sure that I was reading it correctly. And you are literally limited to the known spells column here. On top of that, there is something that should be highlighted, and that when you take spells, 2 of the spells that you've taken, and you'll see that I've already done that, must be from the Abjuration and Evocation spells, spell categories. So when you look at a spell, you'll see that this particular spell here is Evocation, as is this one. This one is a Divination, which is a ritual spell. Technically, you can take that, but really there should be an Abjuration here. Now, the way that I, as a DM, play it is that you can take 2 Evocation or 2 Abjuration, or a mixture of the 2, and then I allow the third spell to be whatever you want. That's why I chose Identify in this particular case, is I wanted to be able to point that out. But in the case of the required spells, I chose 2 Evocation spells. So you don't in my case, you don't necessarily have to have 1 Abjuration and 1 Evocation. The way that I actually read this is that it must be of the Abjuration class or the Evocation class when you choose the spells. Okay? All right. Beyond that, there is nothing else that we need to deal with from setting up your spells. However, did we gain any additional abilities? So we still had Action Surge. We got the Eldritch Knight Martial Archetype, as well as the Martial Archetype definition dropped into place. We already had Second Wind and Great Weapon Fighting. We got Spellcaster. We already had Weapon's Eye. Ooh, what's this? This would be Weapon Bond. Okay. What Weapon Bond gives you is when you've taken the time to bond with a given weapon. So let's say this particular character decided to bond with the longsword here. Okay. What that would mean is that you cannot be disarmed of that particular weapon. There can be no disarming attack that can succeed on you, even if it happens to be a critical hit, and based on the description that is here. In addition, if the weapon was dropped in the exact same plane of existence that you are standing in, so in the case of Forgotten Realms, you're on the world of Toril. If you happen to lose your weapon somewhere outside of Baldur's Gate and you are now in Waterdeep, you can still summon that weapon, which makes it a very nice capability and adds a little bit of the Eldritch aspect to your melee weapon. Specifically, you can summon it as a bonus action on your turn, and it will teleport instantly into your hand. You can have up to 2 bonded weapons, but can summon only 1 at a time with a bonus action. So you could bond both the longsword and the shortsword, summon the first one to your dominant hand on your first turn as a bonus action, summon the second on the second round. Okay? And that way it makes it easier. Theoretically, it's a faster way to draw, because it's teleporting it directly from your scabbard into your hand. Or maybe it's now in your backpack because you feel confident about carrying it there, or it's somewhere on your back in a not so easy place to get. Those kinds of things. So now that we have level 3 done, I'm going to go ahead and apply level 4. And what that's going to give us is an ability score improvement. Eldritch Knights benefit from a high intelligence modifier. And that is mainly because when you attack an NPC or Bob or whatever with a spell, and they have to make a saving throw, the higher your spell modifier, the higher that overall saving throw is going to have to be for them to succeed or fail. Rather. So what I'm going to do in this case is simply modify this and bring it up to 15. But what I could have done is 3 options. I could have added, in addition, not in addition to, but instead of doing the +2 to one particular ability, I could have taken 2 abilities and modified each of them by 1. So, for example, instead of taking the intelligence to a 13, I could have taken the dexterity and the constitution each to a 14. But there's also a third option, and the third option is entirely up to whether your DM is going to allow you to take that or not. And what that is called taking a feat. And there's a lot of DMs out there that won't let players take feats during their campaigns. And the reason being is feats modify the abilities that you are going to have. So in this case, it adds an enhancement outside of the leveling component, if you will. You as a player get to choose it. You're not handed it as part of your leveling process. But there are some restrictions. So for example, Elven Accuracy requires you to be an elf or a half-elf in order to be able to take that particular skill. I believe Heavily Armored requires you to already be proficient with medium armor. Things like that. But there are others that are not. For example, Alert, Lucky, and I believe Charger is pretty much, you can take it as at will. So that's part of the reason why DMs don't necessarily allow players to take feats. They allow their players to only stick with the 2 options of taking 1 ability and increasing it by 2, or taking 2 abilities and increasing them by 1. Feats are optional in a lot of ways. In this particular series, because I've already done feats in the other 2, the champion and the battlemaster, I'm not going to do feats in this particular one unless I think it's appropriate for this particular character. Okay, and so I just want to give you a bit of a heads up there. And there might be something here that an Eldritch Knight might be able to benefit from. I haven't looked through them all, so I actually don't know. And Spell Sniper might be one of them. But I digress on that particular side of the conversation. In this particular case, I've already added level 4. I've made my adjustment. But there's also something else that happens in that I get an additional spell slot. And I also get another known spell. So I've already not dropped. There we go. I have not dropped another spell there, but I'm going to take, what was it, Mage Armor, I believe. I believe that falls under the Evocation and, oops, that's Magic Missiles. There we go. Yes, so it falls under the Abjuration category of spell classes, so it's a spell that I can take. And I have confirmed that the spell must be of these 2 schools going forward. It does not look like you get to take anything else, a spell from any other school, outside of that one little bonus spell that you get during your startup. At least in my campaigns. The rest, you have to take the Abjuration or Evocation classes. When you think about it, you're a combat specialist, so most of your spells are going to be associated with that. Not going through and identifying particular items. You might be curious, but that's as far as it goes. With level 5, we gain something called an extra attack, and I will explain how that will work in the case of an Eldritch Knight. Okay, there we go. So the extra attack ability is very specific on what you get when you get the extra attack. And it comes down to an attack action. An attack action is you throwing a rock at somebody, swinging a sword at somebody, shooting a ranged weapon at somebody, attacking someone with a melee weapon, hitting them with your fist, things like that. It is not spellcasting. Spellcasting is classified as its own action. So as a result, you cannot execute at this particular level any form of casting outside of it being a bonus action as well as a melee attack. Okay, so the way that the Eldritch Knight works is you get to make 2 melee attacks with your primary weapon and then execute a bonus spell, or like a bonus action spell, whether it's most likely a cantrip. I don't know if there's any spells that are non-cantrip that are bonus action or not. Or your feature abilities such as Action Surge. So it's one of the most confusing aspects about how the Eldritch Knight works. Now, when you acquire War Magic, you can with limited aspects, and we'll get into that when we get to level 7. That's when you actually acquire that skill. But in the case of the extra attack, you are gaining that through your fighter class. You're not gaining it through the Eldritch Knight class. So the bonuses that you get because of that don't apply to your Eldritch Knight capabilities, is a good way to look at that. With level 6, once again, the fighter is getting an ability score improvement, and I'm going to drag level 6 into place, and I'm simply going to modify the intelligence up to level 17. Now I'm gaining a nice little bonus when it comes to the dice saving throw that I'm now going to be flinging at NPCs or creatures, because now they have an additional bonus point when it comes to the total saving throw value that they have to succeed over, which means Burning Hands should theoretically require you to dodge Burning Hands at a higher dice check as opposed to the 1 point lower. That's generally how I understand how that works. We don't gain any additional spells or anything like that, and we don't gain any additional abilities or feats. So level 6 is a fairly straightforward leveling up in this particular case. Level 7 is when we get our martial archetype features. So in this case, it'll be War Magic. I'm just going to pop that open there and just leave it there for now. I'm going to drag the fighter class on top of that. And before I get to War Magic, I'm actually going to take a look at the spells. So I do gain a 5th spell known. And I do gain an additional spell slot, which doesn't necessarily change anything that we have to do here. It's already been done for us. On top of that, we also gain our first, second level spell slots. In this case, we get 2 of them at one shot. You have 2 options here. You can actually take another first level spell if you so choose. It still has to be of the Abjuration or Evocation spell schools. However, one thing you can do is cast some spells at higher levels. So for example, if we take a look at Burning Hands here, if you look at the bottom of that spell, it has what happens at higher levels, essentially. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2 or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each spell slot above level 1. What that means is that if I were to cast Burning Hands at 2nd level, instead of me rolling, I think it was 3d6 points of damage to start. Yes, 3d6 fire damage. I can now cast 4d6 fire damage. This is where some players can get confused, because typically when you cast the damage effect, so if I were to simply click that, it's actually going to roll damage. What a lot of people don't know is that you can actually left click and drag that out. And what that does is that drops the total number of die that you as a player are going to roll. Now, if you're saying that I'm casting this at 2nd level, that means I can add 1 more die 6 to this particular cast. And to do that, I just right click once, and that now throws in a 4th die, and I just roll them manually like that. Not a whole lot more in the way of damage, because I got some pretty mediocre rolls, but it simplifies having to manipulate anything about this particular actions page, because you might only do that once in a blue moon. You're not necessarily going to cast a given spell all the time at level 2, and literally you can't, because I've cast that spell, I now have to take that pip. And what that tells the DM and you as a player is that you have used a spell at 2nd level, even though it was a 1st level spell. So that's the reason why I say you don't necessarily have to take a level 2 spell when you acquire level 7. I am, however, going to take a level 2 spell, and I apologize for my my work phone there kicking in, but I am going to take Melf's Acid Arrow, I believe. And yes, it is a evocation school. So what I typically do, I have found it safer to minimize all of my spell categories so that when I drag a new spell into place, it creates the level 2 category. I have had in some cases, so for example, if I were to drag this ability here, it drops it into the fighter category, but that kind of seems a little strange to me. So that's not correct in a lot of ways. So it's sometimes just safer to minimize everything that you can. You can't always minimize everything. So for example, you can minimize that, and you can't minimize the spell slots. That's just not happening. And I don't know if you can minimize weapons. Yes, you can. So just shorten the window enough to be able to give you enough space to be able to drop it in. It has to be somewhere above, roughly about this point here, and below the next lowest segments. And you can just minimize everything that's in the way. And that just makes it easier to add the weapons or add the skills and or spells that you want. And then you can just go back and expand everything out once you're done. Some players will actually go through and just minimize the ones that they're not necessarily using right off. That way they can say, what do I have left? That kind of thing. On the off chance that they've cast all their say for first level spell slots, but they have 5 first level spells, but they still have a 6th spell available as level 2. Well, they obviously can't cast. Well, they could cast level 1. That level 1 spell is a 2nd level, but who knows? We'll see. All right, so that covers how spellcasting works. Now, I have no idea why that title just disappeared, and the rest of them, anyway. War Magic. War Magic now gives you the ability to start taking advantage of your arcane nature of your Eldritch Knight. And what I mean by that is that starting at level 7, you as an Eldritch Knight can now go through and cast a cantrip and still make a weapons attack if you make a bonus action. So let's say you decide to cast Firebolt as your attack as opposed to making a longsword attack. But it doesn't quite take down the target that you're taking down there. So essentially what that means is that now I can take Firebolt. Doesn't quite take down that creature. I can now make an attack with my longsword. Not my short sword, because that's technically in the offhand. Okay? So it depends on how you as the player want to actually make use of that. And why does that look like second and... There we go. I must have somehow managed to type that in there. Okay. So this is where, essentially, this is where you as the player can go through and actually start making use of the arcane capabilities that you are acquiring as you level through the Eldritch Knight subclass, or specialization, not subclass. And we've already done that. We've now gone over this. Okay, so next level is going to be level 8. With level 8, we once again get another ability score improvement. Now it's already at 17. At 18, I'm going to get another bonus. So this time I might decide to increase my intelligence by 1 point and my constitution by 1 point to give me a little bit more of a robustness when it comes to being in combat. So I'm actually going to do that. And I'm actually doing that intentionally because I've shown this in other videos. Now you'll notice something. Your constitution bonus went up by 1 point, but your total hit points did not. You are level 8, which means you as the player now have the ability to modify your hit points and add those 8 hit points. So it's your bonus times your level. Let me rephrase that. It is the bonus you have gained times your level, and you add that to your total hit points that you currently have. And the reason for that is that you have now gained additional constitution. As a result, that sort of acts like back pay in that you can now go back and acquire all of the hit points that you would have potentially required had you had that particular bonus when you first acquired, or when you first created your character. So that's literally all it comes down to, is you're adding the bonus that you would have acquired right from the get-go to your hit points. Level 9 now gives us our next fighter ability, and that is Indomitable. And so I'm just going to drag fighter into place. We still don't... Oh, I should have acquired an extra spell at level 6, or sorry, at level 8, so I forgot to do that. Just one moment. Now we are limited as to what we can take. Misty Step is Conjuration, so technically couldn't have that. Scorching Ray is Evocation, so that falls under the category of spells. Now I already have a level 2 spell category here, so I can literally just drag and drop it. It'll add it to the appropriate category. Okay, so level 9 gives us the Indomitable ability. And what that means is that you can re-roll a saving throw that you fail. And it looks like fall, but it is actually fail. If you do so, you must use the new roll. So let's say you rolled your saving throw. And I will show you how to properly do that here in a moment. So if you go to the main tab here, you can literally just double click on these die here. So let's say you had to make a strength saving throw. Well, that's a critical saving throw. There we go. That chances are your dexterity saving throw there would have failed. You can now re-roll that using your Indomitable feature. So if I roll again, hopefully get a high number. No. I now have a worse number. But guess what? You have to take that number. That's the restriction that you fall into when it comes to Indomitable. Now, a character that has luck might be able to trigger a third reroll and continue to do so as long as they burnt through their luck points. But I don't know. That would be entirely up to the DM. There we go. So you just modify that, throw it into the fighter category. But now there's one little thing that you still have to do. You still have to set it up for actual use. So the restriction here is that it is a long rest. So in order for you to use this, you can use it, but before you gain it back, you actually have to go through and execute a long rest. So you get one use per day as opposed to one use per rest, which is different from your action surge and your second wind capabilities that you've had earlier. So essentially what that means is that I would have to go through, and as this character has now used it, that character is going to have to execute a long rest in order to reacquire it. And that's it. If I use this and I try to go through and do a short rest, it doesn't come back. I have to do a long rest. So that is level 9. So level 10, we gain our next martial archetype. And this one is a nice one. So I'm going to drag level 10 into place. Level 10, we do gain another spell. And we also gain an additional second level spell slot. So this is where you can actually go through and really flesh out the spells that you have. And that would be Transmutation. I don't know why they list these here if you aren't really supposed to be able to take them, but I could be totally misconstruing that. I generally restrict my players to only being able to do Abjuration and Evocation spells. Let's see. That's a Transmutation. That's a Conjuration. Necromancy. Yeah, that's not going to work. Gust of Wind. Evocation. Okay, we'll go with Gust of Wind. So I'm going to drag that into the second spell category. So it must only work with spells that you can drag it into different categories. Okay. So that takes care of that, and as I've stated earlier, you don't have to worry about your spell slots. They automatically accumulate for you. It's literally just the known spells. Now, something I haven't been doing is preparing the spells that I've been acquiring. Oops. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, our martial archetype that we acquired was Eldritch Strike, and that is an action. And it's actually the first action that will give us its own category up here, because it is something we can make use of, potentially. So, Eldritch Knight. Alright, so all I've done is I literally typed in Eldritch Knight, and then I hit the tab key for this category to pop open. Now, is there an action? There is not. Why is that? Because technically there is an effect. what you are doing is you are essentially giving the creature disadvantage on any saving throw for a spell that you cast at it before the end of your next turn. So what that means is that in one turn, you can execute an attack and make use of the Eldritch Strike ability here, and an effect should be put on that particular creature that essentially marks that creature that if you cast a spell that has a saving throw, that creature then suffers disadvantage on that saving throw before the end of your next turn. So you can actually, this whole round could go through and finish and come back to you. You can now make an attack that uses a spell that will trigger a saving throw, and that still applies. The problem is that there isn't an easy way to set up an effect for that purpose. So I've come up with a way, but it's going to require a bit of work by the DM as well as you as the player. And here is what we can do. So we can add an effect to this particular capability, I keep calling them capabilities. They're features. I'm going to call it Eldritch Strike, and that should be sufficient for the name. Save. Now what that's going to do, and it will last for 2 rounds, and there's a reason I'm putting it on for 2 rounds, and I will actually show you as to why. So I will set it initially to 1, and on next roll, on next action. So what you're going to want to do is at the end of your round, you as the player, you're going to want to apply this to the targeting question, as long as you've told the DM you're planning on using this. And you can do that just by clicking this, and it will show that it's being used. There is no long or short rest requirement here, so you don't need to set up a preparation for this. But there's going to be a bit of work when it comes to how this particular effect is going to come into play. So I'm going to show you what I've come up with. If you see here, I've got the Eldritch Knight added in with all the other characters, and I still have the Goblin Boss that I was using in the previous one, and as you can see, I'm using this on the DM screen because you can see all the hit points. I have no effects on this Goblin Boss right now. I do, however, as the Eldritch Knight, have the Goblin Boss targeted. So let's say I've gone through, I've completed all of my attacks, and I've hit with one of those attacks, because that's really how this is going to come into play here. And what I can do is apply the effect to this particular creature. But there's going to be a problem. If that Battle Master or that champion casts a spell right now that is going to require that Goblin Boss to execute a saving throw, that particular effect is going to come into play. What the DM is going to have to do is, you can see here, there's an on-off capability, or an on indicator here, and it's active and visible. The DM is going to have to skip one use, so that when things come through here, like if, I don't think either of these guys have that ability, but let's say that they do. They cast the something that requires them to execute a saving throw. Actually, the Battle Master might. So let me load up the Battle Master. Set this over here for a moment. Execute one of the effects. So let me execute. So if I execute a strength save on this particular, oops, I don't have that targeted. We should see that it should not roll with any disadvantage. It still failed because it had to succeed an extremely high check there. but it has not failed. And you'll see that it has now come back on automatically. Well, the champion might have something, or another creature. So the DM's going to have to constantly remember to keep turning that off. But remember, I set this as an expiration of 1 round. The problem is, the Eldritch Knight still has the ability to make use of it up until the end of his round. So if I go to there, it's going to be gone. So now the Eldritch Knight can't make use of it. But if you set that as 2 and then apply it, we go through the rigmarole, it gets temporarily disabled, and the DM can actually flat out turn it off, so it's inactive, until your turn comes back. And then he turns it on, or she turns it back on. Now, when you make your next attack, theoretically, it should, with a spell that requires a saving throw, oops, that's the champion. So where's my burning hands here? In theory, it should trigger a disadvantage, and it should go away. So there's a bit of work in play, but it is a method that will function. There isn't really a way to have the dis save that I can think of anyway, to have the dis save effect apply only when you are attacking it. Because that goblin boss would have to have you targeted at the same time that you're attacking it in order for the effect to come into play. So level 11 is going to be our next level, and I've already dragged it into place. And what that's going to give us is 1 extra attack, 1 extra attack. And what that means to you as a player is that you can now make 3 melee attacks with your primary weapon during 1 round. You can also make use of a bonus action, and that could include a spell that is triggered off as a bonus action, or an ability, so like Action Surge, for example. If you make use of Action Surge, you can have a total of 6 primary weapon attacks. But you can't use Action Surge if you use your offhand weapon if you're dual wielding. So with the short sword, for example. However, here's the other thing. If you take an action, which is a casting action, and make use of a cantrip, you don't gain any benefits from the extra attack capability here. And excuse me, apparently I have a frog in my throat. So this is kind of still a sticky point when it comes to how the Eldritch Knight works. And it's one of the more problematic components of the Eldritch Knight, because people always seem to have their own idea as to how that particular capability works. And it's typically crystal clear. It's an extra attack on an attack method, and that implies non-spellcasting. With level 12, we are getting our next ability score improvement, and I'm fairly happy with where things are sitting here when it comes to the intelligence and the strength of this particular character. The Constitution could use a little bit of help, but you'll notice that with this particular character, I'm not going for a whole lot in the way of feats. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm actually going to choose a feat, and I'm going to try to pick one that will make sense for the Eldritch Knight to take outside of the alert option, which is definitely a viable option. So give me 1 second, I'm going to go look for one and I'll be right back. Alright, so I went through and identified one feat that I think will be highly useful, and that is Elemental Adept. And the reason why I've chosen that particular feat is because this character has a number of fire-specific spells that I can now take advantage of. So if I actually go through and attack a creature who has resistance on fire, because I have chosen that as the elemental capability or elemental type that I'm most adept at, when I attack someone with a resistance to fire, it bypasses that resistance, so they take the full damage, which is really nice. On top of that, whenever you roll damage with that particular type of fire, so if I cast Burning Hands and I rolled nothing but ones, I could treat all those ones as twos, which makes things nice and easy. The problem is I can't think of any way right off in order to adjust the spell to be able to do that. And that is something that I'm going to potentially have to look at. There were a couple of suggestions on the comments in some of my videos that may apply here. I'm going to go back and reread them, see if I can actually identify whether they are applicable to this particular case or not. But for now, I'm just going to continue to go through and finish off the leveling. If by the time I come to the end of the video, I've thought of a way to go through and make that adjustment, I will. All right, so that completes level 11. Correction, actually it does not, because there is in fact another spell that we can acquire here. And I should have actually done it at level 10, but I should have acquired a cantrip. So I'm going to do both of those now. So I'm going to choose my cantrip first. So I've only got Firebolt and Mage Hand. So let's see here. Is there a restriction on that? Okay, so there's no restriction on the cantrip. It can be any of them. That could be useful. I'll set that aside. Choosing spells is always the fun part. I think actually I'm going to go with Acid Splash because I want this character to be all about the damage. Alright, so that's the cantrip. And now for the spell. I'm going to go with the level 2 spell again. Ooh, okay. Here's an example of a spell that can't make use of a focus because there's a cost value associated with this particular. Well, maybe, but I'm pretty certain that when it specifies that there is actually something that costs gold pieces, silver pieces, whatever, you actually have to have that when it comes to spellcasting. So I'm not going to worry about that one then. So one thing I forgot to cover is the fact that as an Eldritch Knight, you are casting spells, but you're technically using a focus or arcane focus in order to cast these. You don't necessarily have to have the spell components like you used to in previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons. And that I don't know if that's new with 5th edition. Again, as I've stated in the past, I'm skipping from 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons into 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So let's see. Phantasmal Force is an illusion, which means I can't take that. Ray of Enfeelment is necromancy. Web? Nope, that's conjuration. So remember, the restriction is that it has to be an abjuration spell, as well as, or an evocation spell, I should say, not as well as. That would be conjuration. Is there another level 1 I could take? Thunderwave. Thunderwave, that's a good one to take. There we go. Okay, so that'll do. And that finishes level 11. Level 12 gives us another ability score improvement. And that means that, oops, I did that again. And I have a nasty habit of moving windows, so I'm starting to slowly learn how to get them back when they go out of scope. So in case you didn't catch that, I grabbed this window right on the edge here of this particular window frame, and it allows you to drag it back regardless of where it is. I've not been able to find any other way to drag them back when you push them off screen. And if you've got it completely off screen, short of potentially maybe grabbing the bottom or barely getting the lip on the top here where you can potentially grab it again if you've shoved it down at the bottom or the top of the window. I've not been able to find a way to recover those screens short of deleting some settings that I prefer not to delete because it undoes everything that you've done within your interface here. So, back on topic, I've now increased level 12. We're going to gain an ability score improvement. And this time I am going to take my strength and move it up to a 20 because we're going to get a couple more ability score improvements as we go along. And I want to be able to maximize the amount of damage as well as the amount of spell damage that this particular character is going to do and potentially benefit from a little bit of a constitution boost here shortly. And I would have done that had I not taken the feat, but because this character has a large number of fire spells, I definitely wanted to take advantage of bypassing resistances and whatnot. And I think that would benefit this particular character in the long run. Now, there are no additional spells that we gain at level 12, but we do gain our first set of third level spells in addition to a new spell at level 13. So might as well go ahead and skip ahead to level 13. So level 13 is going to give us an additional spell that we can use, and it can now be of a third level. On top of that, we get our second use of Indomitable, which is awesome. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is modify Indomitable. So I'm going to switch that to Preparation, change that to a 2, and I've been forgetting to do it, but I'm going to prepare the additional spells here. I don't need to do that for the cantrip, so that everything's ready to go with all the spells that I have thus far. On top of that, I'm going to look at my first level 3, and I'm going to let everyone guess as to what my first level 3 spell is going to be. There's no way I am not letting an Eldritch Knight use a fireball. I love that spell. I absolutely love that spell, and that's just simply due to the significant amount of damage that you can do. Now, the disadvantage is that you will only ever be able to cast this as a 4th level spell at maximum. You don't get 5th or higher spells. So you'll only ever be able to add 1d6 on top of the total. How many is it here? Well, there's an easy way to tell. Well, that would be the attack. Here's the damage. That many die. So if you recall, if I were to cast this spell at 4th level, once I get a fourth spell slot or 4th level spell slot, holding down and the left mouse button and dragging it out of the window that you're in will allow you to maintain the dice. And you can actually, if you let go of it, it just simply does that. So you cannot let go of the left mouse button. You have to continue holding it. If, however, you then want to add the additional 1d6, you right click once and it will throw on an additional die. And then you just simply roll it and there's your damage. You don't have to worry about fiddling around with the numbers here or anything like that. And you could, I suppose, modify this so that you don't necessarily have to do that. And I don't know why that took so long to show up. Interesting, but that's actually a nice damage roll. You could potentially, as an alternative method, add a damage component to this that essentially is already prepared for fourth level. And what you can do is simply drag this, add one more, and drop it. You got to get it right. Drag this, add one more, and drop. Really? 7, 8, 9. And if I put them there, okay, so I guess you can't drag them from there. Oops, I got one too many. You're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. So that's 96. And you just change the damage type to fire, and the save is on this, so the tag of saving on damage is, or whether someone's going to save and take half damage, is already dealt with as part of the attack roll when they execute the saving throw. You can see that little H there. That's what that means. Excuse me. But essentially, I can now say, okay, I'm casting this at 3rd level. Done. Oh, no, wait, I'm going to next turn cast this as 4th level because I no longer have any 3rd level spots. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to hold right click or anything like that. You can actually preload your ability to cast it at higher levels if you wish. You just have to make sure that you are able to distinguish between them because it's going to add something up here, and you got to make sure that you don't click the wrong one unintentionally. Because what could end up happening is if your last die here, for example, is a 6, the DM might just cancel that 6 right out if you misroll. So generally, it's safer to just simply left click, drag, add, done, and you're done. It really doesn't take that much in the way of effort. You're saving yourself a couple of clicks, but that's really about it. That's nice. Damage just going up. Okay, so that takes care of the spell. And I've already dealt with the Indomitable capability, and our proficiency bonus is now gone up as well. So you can see that our saving throws have gone up in addition to that. So now whenever we're asked to make a strength saving throw, we now have a +9 bonus to that. And whenever we're asked to make a constitution saving throw, we are receiving a +6 to that. Nice. Level 14 gives us another ability score improvement. And, oops, apparently I didn't drag 13 into place, so 14. I keep forgetting to do that, and I don't know why. I'm going to bring intelligence up to 20. And that's just simply going to benefit the overall amount of damage, or saving throws rather, that an NPC will have to resist in order to succeed or fail on a particular saving throw. So that's just going to benefit you here. And we also get a 10th spell at level 14. And it looks like you're going to get a maximum of 13 spells that you can have. So I'm going to choose another level 3 spell. And once again, it has to be, oops, sorry, I just bumped the microphone. It has to be an abjuration or evocation spell. And a good example of that would be lightning bolt. Who doesn't love a good lightning bolt being thrown at them? Okay, so maybe the person having it thrown at them doesn't necessarily like it, but the one thing that I don't know if DMs do it with 5th edition or not, but during 2nd edition, a lightning bolt had the ability to reflect back. So if you're 30 feet from a wall and the target that you're casting a lightning bolt at is between you and that wall, that lightning bolt is going to go through the creature, hit the wall, and reflect immediately back at you. And because it can travel 100 feet, it's only traveled 60 feet before it hits that creature again. So technically it can hit it twice, but it's also then going to hit you. And if you've got a wall 5 feet behind you, it's going to reflect off that wall again, hit you, hit the creature, and then almost get to... It'll bounce back onto the wall on the opposite side of the hallway again, and then start coming back and then fizzle out. So you could potentially get yourself hit twice, and the creature that you're casting that lightning bolt at could potentially get hit 3 times. That can be a bit tricky on how to play that. And I don't know if 5th edition still makes use of that. They don't specify whether there's a reflection in play anymore, but that's what it was like on 2nd edition. I've asked some opinions on that, and I'd like to get your opinions on that as well. But so far, it seems to be split down the window, or split down the middle, rather. I was just looking at the window at the time I said that. So it's a bit of a hit and miss. It's really going to come down to the DM. I typically play it with reflection because that's how I've always played it, both as a player and a DM. And I have been in some 5th edition games where the DM also dealt with it as a reflection. But again, that was also a DM that came from older versions of Dungeons & Dragons. Newer DMs may not be aware of that, and that may be why they don't play it. So I'd like to get your opinion on that particular spell. Okay, so we are on 14, correct? Yes, I've already applied everything, and I've applied the spell, so we're good. So level 15 gives us our next martial archetype, and I've already dragged the level into place and loaded up the actual ability. So it is Arcane Charge, and what this means is that when you make use of your action surge, which is a fighter ability, you can teleport up to 30 feet into an unoccupied space that you can see. There's a few restrictions with that. So I've already dragged it into place as well, so that's already there. But the way I would use this as a DM, or allow a player to use this as a DM, is as follows. When you make use of Action Surge, you are gaining the ability to attack again. You as the player can make use of your extra attacks during that particular encounter. So if you've done your 3 primary attacks, you use Action Surge as your bonus action, and then you take 3 additional attacks. I would allow you as a player to teleport out after you make your 3rd attack, your 3 attacks. But if you do so and that creature is still alive and you are still within 5 feet of that creature, or 10 feet, depending on what its reach is, I would argue there is still an attack of opportunity against you because of that, if they haven't already used one. And the reason why I say that is this particular ability does not state that you don't suffer from an attack of opportunity. That means the attack of opportunity rule applies. The only time the attack of opportunity is overridden is if the feature or spell or whatever states that you do not suffer an attack of opportunity as a result. So as the DM, I would rule you would suffer an attack of opportunity if you did that and that particular target, or another target is still that's within reach of you and can make an attack against you, has an attack of opportunity. So if you are surrounded by 4 creatures, you make your attacks and all 4 creatures are still there, all 4 of them can attack you before you can finish that teleport. You will still get to 30 feet out, provided you're alive, but that is the way I would operate that particular feature. At 15, we do not get any additional spells, and it's literally just the addition of the Arcane Charge archetype feature. So that finishes off level 15. Level 16 is going to give us our second last ability score improvement, and it's absolutely insane how many a fighter actually gets, but it's understandable due to the fact that the fighter is usually in the front line. So in a lot of ways, they're going to take advantage of making use of this. Now, I've just modified the constitution in this particular character, and that's brought it up to a +3 from a +2. So there's a 1 point increase here, multiplied by 15 levels. That gives me 15 additional hit points I can apply here, which brings us up to 139. Provided my math is right. And holy jeez, that hit die thing is still white. I hope they fix that soon. I've been updating every day that they've released an update, so I'm hoping they do fix that soon. Hopefully somebody's reported it. I'll have to go double check. And that finishes the ability thing. Now from here, we do gain an additional spell. And you also gain an additional spell slot for level 3. So, level 3 spell I'm going to take. Let's see if there's something here I can take. That would be Conjuration. Once again, and I've stated this throughout this video, there is a restriction on the type of spells that you can actually take. So, that could be useful. So, Abjuration and Evocation are the 2 spell types that you could take. And this one falls under the Abjuration school, so we are good there. And that gives us the ability to prepare that particular spell, and I haven't prepared any of my level 3 spells. Wow, I'm slacking. Okay, so everything's ready to go. Level 17 is now an increase for 2 of our fighter abilities on their uses, so I'm still going to stick with the action page, and I will drop the level into place here in a moment. Action Surge can now have 2 uses, and Indomitable can now have 3 uses. So that's a 2, and that's a 3, and I'm going to switch that back so you can see that we now have 2 pips and 3 pips. And I'm going to drag this into place. And apparently I didn't drag level 16 into place, so I'm going to drag level 17 into place. Wow. I don't know why I'm doing that, honestly. Okay, so that is that. With level 18, we're going to gain our last martial archetype, and that is going to be improved war magic. And so I'm going to not forget this time, and I am going to drag the fighter ability into there, and then take a look at what this card states. Okay, so now you as the player gain the ability to cast a spell and make a melee weapon attack. So if you think about it, you as a fighter have the ability to, an Eldritch Knight specifically, have the ability to go two different directions. Now this particular character I've set up to be a dual wielder, even though I haven't taken any dual wielding feats or reduced any of the, oops. Speaking of, I need to reduce this by one more point. Or set it up so that this character will benefit from dual wielding in any way, shape, or form. But with the champion and the battle master, I've already covered most of this, but now we're fairly late in the video, so I better cover this now. As a dual wielder, you would have the ability to make use of a longsword attack and a short sword attack, but the short sword attack can only come into play as a bonus action as long as your primary attack connects. Okay. What that means is that at level 18, you can attack 3 times with your primary weapon, and if one of those connects, execute a melee attack with the short sword as a bonus action. That's one method of attacks that you have available to you as an Eldritch Knight. The second option is to take 3 primary attacks, call out Action Surge, and make 3 more primary attacks at level 18. So that means you could technically use your longsword 6 times, and it doesn't have to be on the same creature. But you have to call out how many you're going to use. So for example, if you've got 2 creatures in front of you, you're going to take 2 attacks out of those 3 attacks against the left creature and 1 against the one on the right. You again have to specify whether you're going to do the same thing or something different when it comes to your extra attacks that you gain through your extra attack ability. So that is method 2. Method 3 gives you the ability to cast a cantrip and then make a single melee attack with your longsword. Okay. Option 4 now gives you the ability at level 18 to not just cast a cantrip, but cast a full-blown spell and then make a melee attack with your longsword. So you now have 4 methods you could potentially make use of for actually attacking someone. That is how the attack system works in the Eldritch Knight sphere of abilities. And we do not gain any additional spells at level 18, so that completes this particular level. At level 19, we gain our last ability score improvement. Actually, I just wanted to double check. Yep, okay, we're good. We gain our last ability score improvement. And in this case, I am going to bounce the Constitution up to 18, giving me a +4, which means I can now add 19 additional hit points to this particular character. And holy crap, this character is rolling good. Thinking. So, 19, that would be 194. Oops. This character's got a lot of hit points in comparison. If you take a look at the Battle Master, he only has 184. If you take a look at the champion, he only 184. Somehow I managed to get a really good roll on the Eldritch Knight. He's been rolling really well. He must have been rolling 9s most of the time. Yeah, look, 9. At level 19, we also gain our second last spell ability, and we gain our first level 4 spell slot. So I'm going to set this up to be able to add in a level 4 spell. And what shall that be? We already have Fireball. Ice Storm is a possibility. Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum is a possibility. That is a bonus possibility there. Wall of Fire. Oh, I'm going to take Wall of Fire, just simply because of the fact that it will benefit from the elemental feat that we took earlier. Okay. That will get one more level, spell rather. So I'm going to hold off on that. That pretty much, I think, is all of the fire. Well, I suppose Fire Shield, but no, yeah, that is Evocation, so that may come into play. We'll see. And I've already managed to deal with the ability score improvement. We now have a +6 to our proficiency bonuses, which is nice. And we've already applied our level and modified our hit points and constitution as a result. So that completes level 19. Level 20. This is the last level that a character can achieve, and that is because currently, as of the time of the D&D world and structure, you can't go past level 20. There may be some DMs out there that have created level chains past this particular point, but the official rules stop at 20. Now, I know with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, they introduced the Path to the Gods, and that was allowing you to go past level 20. I don't think they're going to do the same thing with 5th edition. I don't know if they've done it with any previous edition, to be honest. But at level 20, you're practically a god anyway, outside of actually being in the god sphere. So with level 20, we're going to gain our last extra attack capability. And what that now means is that you, as an Eldritch Knight, still have 4 ways to execute attacks, but you get an extra attack. So your first option is you can attack 4 times, and if any one of those 4 times hits, execute an attack with your offhand weapon, which is your short sword in this case. Option 2 is that you can make use of your 4 primary attacks, utilize Action Surge, and make use of 4 primary attacks. So you can attack a total of 8 times in that particular round. But if you want to make use of your spells, you are still restricted in the sense that you cannot utilize your extra attack, your 4th attack. I am going to choose one last spell, and I think I am in fact going to choose that Private Sanctum, because it does sound highly useful in a rest period. So you can actually go through and rest. And I'm just going to drag it in here. It's not actually an actionable spell, but it allows you to tell the DM that you're making use of it. And to be honest, this is the only place where you can put spells. So this is technically your spell book. Okay, so that actually completes the Eldritch Knight. And with that, I'm going to move on to doing the rest of the primary classes that are, and then their accompanying class specializations that are introduced from the player's handbook. Once I've finished all of the classes and the class specializations from the player's handbook, I will circle back and start dealing with the supplements. And the reason I'm going to do that is most people are using the player's handbooks. Most DMs and players have the player's handbook. Not everybody has the supplements. There are quite a few that do, but not everybody does. So I want to get all of those primary classes and primary class specializations out the door first, and then I will circle back and start doing the rest. So that is the Eldritch Knight, level 20, and how to use, set up, and potentially play this character. We have now completed this particular class, and I hope you have found this particular video useful. If you want any additional items added to it, please let me know in the comments. If you feel that I didn't cover a particular area enough, or you have additional questions, don't hesitate to ask there as well. I'll go through and try to respond best I can. If you did like this video, feel free to click that like button. And if you do like what I'm doing and want to see more, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe.